So let's be as we begin all things by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who have toiled without compassion or compensation. We acknowledge all the elders and the community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for collective liberation and sovereignty. So we do have a panel that everybody is here today. Please introduce yourselves to the colleagues and attendees and tell us about your remarkable work. We can start with Gabby.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Gabrielle Polanco Sorta. I'm the Vice President of Purpose at Gore Mutual Insurance. We're a mutual insurance company, so similar to a co-op, we're actually owned by our members, which allows us a lot of flexibility in terms of how we define the type of value that we want to create as an organization. I'm currently based out of Toronto in the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe. And our operations for Gore Mutual are primarily on Ontario and BC.
Okay. And Adam, you would like to introduce yourself?
Wonderful. Many thanks. Good morning, everyone. Adam Spence, CEO of SVX, calling in from Treaty 13 territory, which is covered by the One Dish with One Spoon Treaty. So SVX is an impact investing intermediary. We work with investors, organizations, funds, and enterprises to help them take the first or next step on their impact investing journey. So work with foundations, financial institutions, funds, governments, a range of different actors through educational programs. So work kind of one-on-one and group programs, workshops, boot camps, etc. We offer advisory services. So if you're a foundation that wants to be able to mobilize 10 million or 20 million dollars in capital towards the purpose, we'll help folks do that, or help to structure things like housing bonds or conservation bonds. We also manage our own funds. We have a platform for impact investments and engage in systems change work. And that's how do we create policy and institutional infrastructure to advance impact investing as an approach. We operate across Canada, but also work in the US, Mexico, and Colombia as well. And just delighted to be joining this conversation.
All right,
so
thank you. Ebenezer, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Melissa, and good morning to everyone. And Kia Capital. Kia Capital is a firm that invests in Black founders. That's our main objective. And we have so far invested in about 12 Black founders, and these are usually in the tech space or tech-enabled startups. Typically, we do pre-seed and then the seed stage. And we have invested in founders in about 3 provinces so far. But beyond that, we've also been very involved in ecosystem services, from developing new talent for investing within the Black community, as well as also bringing actors together. So we'll be happy to share more on the work as we engage in this good conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess we can go to the first question. What are some of the important collaborations or initiatives you would like to amplify currently in your work? And then it's a 2-part question. So I'll ask you the first part, and then I'll ask you the second part, so we don't go off topic. I'm gonna ask Adam first.
That's a great question, and keen to learn more about all the folks on the call and the collaborations that they're working on. You both speak to 3 areas. So one is in community finance. So we're part of a collaborative called Catalyst, and Catalyst is advancing community finance practice across the country in order to build new intermediaries and also help to scale up existing intermediaries. And so that initiative and activity has been in operation for the past few years, but I think we're trying to open up and introduce more opportunities for folks to be able to join and to start and scale their efforts. And so things that are taking place, not advertising, but kind of introducing and making sure folks are aware of the opportunity within Catalyst. We have a summit that's taking place at the end of May 28th to 30th. It's taking place soon for people to learn and identify priorities for the community. There's also work we're doing related to Community Finance Development Accelerator. And so that is, how do you, as an organization, again, that's starting or scaling, build connections and understand and get content related to due diligence, impact measurement, gender and equity lens investing. And so that program is open for applications at the moment, and happy to share a little bit more details in the chat. And then we have a few place-based funds as well that we are developing and managing, like Verge Capital in Southwestern Ontario. It's a loan fund providing capital for enterprises, funds, and projects, from, again, conservation impact initiatives by Carolinian Canada to affordable housing projects to small and medium-sized enterprises. And then another fund called Bloom Local Food Fund, which is based in Eastern Ontario, which is focused on sustainable agriculture and climate action in that part of the province. Beyond that, maybe just identify one other area, which is related to gender lens investing, or supporting women-led enterprises and advancing investors taking that particular approach, something called WIN VC. That's a network across the country, many partners that are building educational programs, again, for investors and entrepreneurs. We have organizations like Spring, Pondish Bonde, Esplanade, WeBC, many others that are joining together for that particular program to introduce that concept and that approach to enterprise and investment. Really excited about that. I mean, one final one, which is our work with partners at a global level, particularly in Colombia. So we've been working there for a better part of the last 6 years in order to advance the development of the impact investing ecosystem in that particular country. We've learned a lot from that particular work and in that ecosystem, but also with Canada and Colombia. So sending investors and entrepreneurs and intermediaries and actors to learn from and with our colleagues and partners there. So I think that's another exciting opportunity when we're thinking about social innovation. What do we learn not only from other provinces, but also our peers and colleagues in other countries?
And do you have any set key priorities in your work right now?
Yeah, so I think when we imagine our priorities at the moment, so how do we grow the number of the scale of the participation in community finance across the country? So that's a big priority for us, including how do we help these different intermediaries, again, start and scale. We think about gender lens investing. How are we supporting and advancing the number of women entrepreneurs that are being supported across the country, making that mainstream as a practice to invest in these kinds of enterprises, again, from an institutional level all the way down to small loan programs at a local level. And then, again, how are we advancing impact investing practice across geographies? Again, finding ways where we can learn from and support not only our colleagues at a national level, but from other countries as well. So those are probably keeping it to the 3 areas that we're working on.
Before I cut, first question was, what are some of the important collaborations or initiatives?
That's right.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, we got it.
Okay.
And so it is a bit twofold. So because we're a property insurance company, one of the things we're looking at really closely is around the impact that climate change is having on vulnerable populations in urban centers. And so we've approached this in a co-partnership building model where we've approached Social Innovation Canada, which I know there was a speaker earlier this week from that organization, as well as York University, to look at what the impacts of climate are on the vulnerable groups, primarily in Ontario and BC and urban centers. And what's been fascinating is that part of that is we've opened up that research to any mutual, cooperative, and credit union, and trying to bring the industry right into the fold in terms of understanding how we can collaborate and work together around these issues that are much bigger than any one organization or community. So that's, I think, really exciting. But the second part of the collaboration that we're focused on is more around what are the needs specifically to the charitable sector in the ecosystems that we as corporates are really dependent on to help us solve some of the issues that we're investing in. And that capacity building is something that we're trying to build out in partnership with the charities that we support. So things like unrestricted funding or trust-based giving, investment and impact measurement outside of the funding models that currently exist. Because right now it seems it seems very difficult for us to be trying to fund programming when we're not investing in the full ecosystem of the charitable sector that's really struggling right now post-COVID. And so that takes one, a lot of work, but two, a lot of how do you say, working backwards in terms of deconstructing some of the ways of historical giving in Canada, and trying to do things very differently and learning really from the experts on the ground that are living and experiencing and working in these spaces.
Okay. And the key priorities for your work is just making sure you're able to help everybody on a full spectrum instead of just one section, in a sense.
Yeah, in a sense. And it's also just trying to engage other corporate grantors to understand the importance of just trust-based giving, and ensuring that we're building the capacity of the organizations that we are going to be dependent on into the future. And that does take time in terms of us sharing experiences, and even rethinking about the power dynamics that have existed in the granting sector in the past. And it is about giving up power, which I think is a challenging discussion. And one of the things that we're trying to do is actually, through our work, influence other grantors to think differently about their systems. And
thank you, guys. The attendees seem very interested to connect with you guys. Ebenezer, what are some of the important collaborations or initiatives you would like to amplify currently in your work?
Thank you. So at BKR, ecosystem building is something that has been very key to us, and we are primarily a VC firm. So we engage the ecosystem and community and collaboration on two levels. First and foremost, through the companies that we invest in. So if I give the example of one of our portfolio companies, which is Wovio. Wovio, it's a fintech that is working with various communities to help address issues around non-prime consumers and help them get access to credit at a good rate. And so you would see that for them in particular, one of the communities they worked with was the Whole Woman Network Cooperative, where they were able to work together and then bring in about 129 members actually, and then help them raise about 331,000 in capital. So the first level is this kind of Wovio scenario where we are very deliberate about the kind of companies we invest in and how engaged they are in collaborating with their communities to create change. On the second level, we have also developed a number of partnerships and collaborations. I'll talk about two of them for now. The first one is the fellowship program that we have, and this we partnered with RBC. We also partnered with Future Capital, which is now part of Spring Accelerator. And the idea here is there's a growing interest in our community by people who want to become investors. And there's that need to support them, build the right tools, the right network, the right capabilities to be able to do that. And so we have this fellowship program where our current cohort, which is ending, we have about 6 people, and we've been able to provide them all that support. And this is something that we are in the second cohort, and we'll be working on the third cohort. The other thing that we also have is this collaboration we have with BDC, where we are helping some of our portfolio companies to be able to scale their businesses outside of Canada. And so we are partnered with BDC to be able to do this and help these companies expand those services. So these are, I would say, two key things that I would like to talk about. But also just to know, we are born out of collaboration, starting with the work of Isaac with the DMZ, starting with the Black Innovation Program, all the way through to BKR today. Thank you.
So do you have any set of key priorities of your work right now?
Yes, we have some very key priorities that we have. For us, the primary priority is preparing to launch our second fund. Next to that is we are also looking at how we essentially support our companies to grow their businesses. And so, like I said, this is where we are collaborating with BDC to do that. And in the Q3 of this year, we will be bringing on board our third cohort for the fellowship. One other priority we have, which we are working on, is how do we support other fund managers to be able to develop, and we are working on key collaborations to make this a reality.
Thank you. Gabby, I'm sorry. How do you feel about the future of social innovation in Canada?
So I feel really positive about where the industry and this sector is going. I think when you look at who's driving social innovation in Canada in particular, I think it's quite inspiring because it is not the larger historical, foundations or organizations. They are really grassroots organizations with individuals that are looking to make systemic change and to drive that change for the long term. And I think this element of collaboration, and I would say it's really been fostered, I think, from our learnings even during COVID, in terms of the interconnection between all of our systems and the need for all of us to work together has really driven a lot, I think, of the sentiment and the way that social innovation is being approached by in Canada that's a bit different than in other countries. And so I do feel really positive. I think now it's making sure that, through the other speakers and even ourselves in terms of how we're looking at how to really drive financing to the initiatives that are creating real driving change, and how to make sure that we're removing the barriers for that financing to make sure that we keep this going, that it doesn't just kind of, to me, the biggest gap is understanding in terms of moving away from historically. Again, I'm talking from a grant maker perspective, how we've measured what success looks like, and thinking about things in the longer term, like, financing a program or an initiative, an organization for a year is not enough. Like, there has to be a long-term plan so that the organizations that are driving this change are not spending half their time trying to make sure they can keep the lights on next year and can really focus on the true impact that they're trying to have. And I think that that's the gap that I'm hoping we can talk more about, how to get organizations to bridge that, because ultimately that is one of the biggest barriers from a granting perspective, of having that longer term vision and that empowerment. I would think the next piece of barrier, the things that I think moving up in that trust-based granting, where we're not the ones telling the organizations this is what we want you to actually invest in, but rather, you tell us where you feel you need to invest in to actually have the driving change that your mandate, for the mandate that you're trying to achieve. And I think that those discussions are really difficult. And we're really lucky as a mutual, we don't have shareholder pressure. And so we've granted 50% of our funding last year specifically to unrestricted funds. And we're hoping to share the data around the impact that has had to the partners that we have, publicly, because that is where the true partnership lies, as opposed to the power dynamic of the grantee and grantor. And so, to me, those are like the very essential pieces related to financing these initiatives that really are going to ensure that social innovation thrives in Canada, as opposed to kind of goes back or gets stagnates. I think in terms of, just lastly, in terms of trends, there is still that pressure of how to measure impact and having a true understanding of what that impact means, and that definition, and how different systems use it. Like, government uses it differently than corporate, and then as well as nonprofit and social innovation all use different measures or different definitions of how they're trying to define impact. And we have to be really transparent of what that actually means, because I don't think that there's a clear understanding of how we're going to measure the type of impact to ensure that we're financing the things that will have the biggest impact in the longer term.
Thank you. Ebenezer, how do you feel about the future of social innovation in Canada?
Thank you. I believe that the future is one that will get more diverse. There still remains a big gap in the financing, but we see good trends. If we take, say, the Black community, for example, we see that there is an increasing number of, I would say, Black founders developing very good innovations that are addressing social issues, and these are bankable. They are not just nice ideas that you cannot invest in. And we are also seeing this interest in people within our community, for example, who now want to be involved in that process of really getting the capital to invest in these businesses. There, however, remains that need to make sure that that support is provided to make sure they are able to do that. And I like to borrow from this Black American philosophy of each one teach one, right? And that is to say those who've been privileged to build something have that responsibility to help others that want to get in that space to be able to develop their capacity. And so I think that future requires more collaborations, especially from organizations that have taken the lead to help others that want to enter the space develop and get there.
Have you, what are the gaps? I know you spoke about trends, but what are the gaps and opportunities that you see?
So like I mentioned earlier, one gap is, of course, still the financing gap is still not there. The financing gap is still there. And so obviously we need more investors that come from the community. And that is something that in itself presents that opportunity. So various organizations, I think, should really be partnering on programs and collaborations which seek to develop new fund managers and capital providers to kind of still bridge this funding gap that we need to be able to see social innovation coming from diverse communities become a reality.
Okay, and any opportunities?
Yeah, so I would say in our case, for example, one clear opportunity we have seen that we are working on is a program where we are looking at being able to put together a program where we can support other emerging fund managers to be able to find the tools and resources that they need to be able to invest in the community. And this is something that we are happy to partner with anyone that wants to support us and believes in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Adam, I'm realizing this whole key takeaway for the social impact has been collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. Mm-hmm. Every single panel that I've been in, they've been speaking about the importance of that. And I think a lot of times we think we can do everything on our own, but I guess not. If we're looking for to be in a bigger on a bigger scale and affect more people, I think collaboration is probably the best thing to think. So Adam, how do you feel about the future of social innovation in Canada?
Similarly to yourself, as well as the other panelists and the folks on the line, really excited about it. I think that the future for social innovation in Canada and beyond is very bright. And so we see from participation and from these particular conversations we're having, a level of participation across the summit you've been hosting has been remarkable. Number of folks that are attending events and engaged in work related to collaboration in social innovation also has been remarkable. We also see a greater level of engagement across sectors. As we have social innovation in practice in governments, at a municipal, a provincial, and a federal level. We see it at institutions like universities and colleges across the country. We see it in practice in small and large-sized nonprofit organizations, as well as corporations. If we were to look at it, 5 or 10 years ago, it was an academic definitional conversation. Now we're actually seeing more practice and going from single examples to more of a mainstreaming of this as a particular activity. So I think future is incredibly bright for social innovation in Canada.
And what are the gaps and opportunities and trends that you see?
Yeah, I think there's a number of gaps. So one is on resourcing, and resourcing in all its forms. So grants, human capital investments. So having the right kind of funds to be able to start again or scale your work. So again, if you're a small organization, imagining how you can apply that practice or tackling a pressing social, economic, environmental challenge, how do you do that? You need resources to be able to make that happen. Or if you're at a later stage, You have a collaborative, you have an enterprise, you have a policy you want to advance. Um, how do you have that, larger scale grant capital or investment dollars to be able to make that a reality? I think second is in terms of the knowledge or technical assistance. So how do you have the right kind of capacity and capability to be able to advance social innovation kind of in the country, which also requires a greater level of conversations like this, but also research papers, sharing, and hands-on support to allow, again, large or smaller organizations to be able to advance. And then the enabling policy environment. So do we have the right kind of, again, municipal, provincial, federal policies to enable the kinds of initiatives that people are bringing through social innovation practices into being kind of institutional acts or activities. And so I think that's pretty key. But there's loads of opportunities, I think, to your other question. And probably some may identify. One is corporate social innovation or corporate impact investing. We have one example here already on the panel, but there's many other, again, large and small corporates that are thinking about how do they change their business practice so it is more aligned with stakeholder and community expectations, from, again, Indigenous reconciliation to advancing climate action to embedding equity in their business practice. And Canada has a pretty conservative corporate environment generally, but now I think there's an opportunity for them to be able to deploy their resources in total related to how they practice, but also the money that they have to be able to invest in these kinds of activities. And then when we think about, and if I don't want to be so clinical as to say thematic, but if we look at housing and homelessness, there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration and social innovation and a recognition that it's not a simple approach of let's just allow people to build homes or let's fund our way out of this particular problem. It requires significant, meaningful, long-term collaboration and combination of social innovation practices, again, policies, community action, business, and private sector activity, all in concert to be able to get us to a place where we can have a country where people have a warm, comfortable, safe place to live. And so I realize it's a challenge, but also an opportunity. And so, and there's many other examples of that, but I'll stop there.
And any trends? I know you said some earlier. Do you any other trends that you noticed?
I mean, I think growing interest, as said, and the advancement. Maybe I'll just zoom in on corporate social innovation or what the opportunity is for, again, particularly large entities in the country to be able to advance social innovation as practice. I think that's one that not a lot of people are talking about, but an opportunity for us to talk to and ask, raise our voices, and engage in kind of constructive conversations about how that can be enacted. And then I think there's going to be also probably a conversation on the other side of things when we look at the policy question, right? So the trend that we're looking at, we've had a very supportive, relatively policy environment across the country, but what does it look like in the event of political transition in many different aspects? And so how do we prepare ourselves for that? I think that's going to be a trend that we're going to need to be able to grapple with.
Okay. And since we're already speaking, how do you feel about the role of the institutional investors like pension funds in the ecosystem?
Yeah, I think it's an important question. And so I think pension funds or large institutional investors have a critical role to play to be able to kind of invest in, again, organizations, enterprises, and projects that are not only delivering, financial return to their stakeholders or their investors, but also having a meaningful and positive in the communities and country and societies within which they operate. And so there's a need for them to invest more of their capital locally. There's a need as well for them to put their capital into areas which impact us, again, as Canadians or indeed as the world. So investing in more renewable energy, embedding Indigenous reconciliation practices. How can they finance things like affordable housing, sustainable agriculture, and beyond? And there are many examples of that. You have CDPQ in Quebec that has been leaders in the stewardship investment movement, and has made significant strides. Those folks like Connexion, again, also based in Quebec, which has significant pension assets. But I'll say on the other side, there's a lot of work to be done in institutions and institutional investors to align their investment practice and their investment actions with approaches that align with both the need that we have across Canada, but also the values I think that we hold in terms of social, economic, environmental justice. So a long way to go.
Thank
for sure.
you. Gabby, how do you feel about the role of the institutional investors like pension funds in the ecosystem?
I agree with a lot of what Adam has said. I think that, there's a lot of interest now in terms of how to change the traditional measurements of value. And I do believe that the more I know our organization is a medium-sized organization, so I know part of what we've been, especially with, I see Joe here, but with Social Innovation Canada, has been how do we leverage what we're doing and try to influence others. And I think that the more we can talk about what we and other organizations, including institutional investors, are trying to achieve, and then take it from a learning perspective and engage and collaborate. I think going back to what we were saying, collaborate with others that know. Because oftentimes, and this happens both on the corporate side, is we don't talk a lot about what we're actually trying to achieve. We just say it, as opposed to engaging with others to say we actually don't know how to get there, and we do need help and input. And I think that that's part of the dialogue that is just starting to come now, especially with institutional investors, pension funds, et cetera, having to grapple with the ESG movement from an investment perspective, knowing that there are things they want to do, but there's a fear about talking about it now. There's a fear about promoting it because of the greenwashing or that anti kind of sentiment that's out there. And so we have to find a way to get out of it, because I think I agree with everything you said, and I think that the political environment is likely to change, and it's going to be harder for us to try to talk about what we're trying to achieve without the feeling of reprimand. And I think this space in particular has changed considerably, and none of us are working in this space because it's easy. I think that all of us know that the environment is quite difficult, and even talking about the things that we're trying to achieve and the systems that we're trying to change, there's a lot of backlash on the things that we're trying to do. And so that that component about preparing and trying to do it in a way where we have all these systems actually trying to collaborate will just help to reinforce and protect what we've been able to achieve to date.
And Ebenezer, how do you feel about the institutional investors like pension funds in the ecosystem?
I believe when it comes to funds within the ecosystem, we need to place them in context in terms of where they can effectively, and looking at the scale mandates in terms of what kind of returns they want to see. And I believe that fortunately, last year we saw the government set the tone with the social, that was the social investment, social finance fund, right, which sought to create these wholesalers that would be then able to pool capital from some of these institutional investors, such as the pension funds, that might not typically come direct into a project, sometimes because of the size and the logistics related to that. So I think that when we look at them, we need to look at that within the context of how we leverage such programs like the social finance fund, the wholesale funds, and how do we get these pension funds to fully back and participate in that so that they are better and they are much more positioned to understand our needs and to design products that suit the kind of investment vehicles and we want to have within the communities. So for me, we need to create those linkages, and we need to make sure that all pieces are in place. Because when it comes to the flow of capital, you need to make sure that's a good fit for each party. And I think we are in a very privileged position where we have the social finance fund with all these wholesalers coming in. And there's not a better time to get the pension funds to really put their money where their mouth is now than now. Thank you.
Thank you. Gabby, you spoke about sharing of data. So at Setsi and Sisters in Solidarity, data is like our love language. So what are some of the barriers to sharing data that hinders growth and impact?
Yeah, I think it's always going to be competition. And to your point, I think that the value that organizations have placed on data, but data is what's going to move us in the ultimate sense. And so, you know, it's hard for me on the data part, like being in insurance, specifically in climate. Every insurance company has its own databases on where is the biggest risk, but that's not shared publicly with homeowners, with those purchasing. So we know that there's a considerable value there. And that is, I think, one of the reasons why through the Climate and Equity Lab that we've launched, the whole intention, and this has been with anyone coming into it, whether they're corporate, nonprofit, or from the academic space, is that we're going to share all of the data publicly. Because what we want to do is use that data to help create change and to influence others to actually join. And so that component of being open with data and knowing the power that it can have beyond what you as an organization are trying to achieve is really important. But that competitive nature is always going to be that piece that overlaps that. And I think this is why for us, and I mean, it's been historical in Canada, cooperatives, mutuals, and credit unions have been able to actually do much more because there's a different element of why we exist. The competitive nature is still there, but it's different. And so organizations like Van City, Meridian Credit Union, others, and you see them kind of joining us in this piece is how do we actually share all of our assets from across all of the ecosystems together to actually create change. But it is going to be hard with this essence of we need to get over ourselves literally as a corporate and move beyond the competitiveness and know that there are some elements where it's in the benefit of everyone, society, the economy, to actually work together around some of these huge societal issues, because no one is going to be able to thrive in any sort of environment if we can't solve some of the biggest issues that are crippling our society right now.
Wow. Adam, what are some of the barriers to data sharing that hinders growth and impact that you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think one is the ability to collect it. So the resources you have to be able to gather the information, again, from small and large size organizations. I think the second is having the right kind of common systems and approaches to be able to do that as well. So are those kinds of tools that are commonly understood, have the capacity and capability to do so? There are efforts, and so I don't want to say that that's not possible. There's a common approach to impact measurement, just doing an outstanding job of that, and I'll share that in the chat as well. I think there's some definitional questions as well of what is in and what's out related to impact. I think there's a necessity for us to find ways to create, I don't want to get, again, too academic, but out of taxonomies or approaches where we know, the definitions of impact. So I think that's a challenge or gap to data. And then how are we finding ways to be able to publicly share or disclose that, so it's available for not just the private consumption of an investor, but for the community to be able to know and understand. I think that's another challenge, but also of opportunity related to disclosure and sharing. And then I think it's also about, related to that, the public demand or requirement, and there's in some cases a regulatory opportunity there around asking again from the largest corporations related to their disclosure on equity, on carbon intensity, any manner of different impact categories, that they are requested and required to be able to collect that information without overburdening them with significant costs that they will then concerns about finding ways to eliminate as a requirement. But that is something that just as we ask for financial disclosures to know and understand, that we should be asking for impact disclosures and data. And so I think that again gets into the policy requirement and opportunity for us to be able to pursue as it relates to data.
Thank you. There's to data sharing that hinders growth and impact. Sorry.
Okay, I think quite a lot has been said about this, particularly by Adam. I just want to quickly add that data can be expensive to collect and also produce, right? And so I think one of the things we need to look at is how the collection of that data is also funded, right? Because if we leave it to be funded by private organizations, then there is that economic incentive to want to make it proprietary and benefit from it. And so funding data collection, disclosure, presentation, and all that needs to be a priority because then through say public sources or through philanthropic sources, then you can put that demand for it to be made open and shared, right? So I think it's something that we need to really pay attention
So in
to.
terms
Thank you.
of impact measurement, are there any promising models or best practices you would like to share?
That's $1 million question. I think that unlike, let's say, financial reporting where we have the IFRS and the GAAP, which everyone can go to, it's still evolving. What you, however, have is that there are quite a number of collaborations going on. I think within Canada, there's been quite a lot of writing around the IMP, but you have TIIP, for example, with Cafe and then some other things, trying to get together and then kind of align on this conversation. So I think I'll be doing a disservice to single out one because it's still something that we need to figure out and come to alignment on. When it comes to something like climate, you would see that maybe the SEC in the US and over here it's setting more requirements and that people are forced to, but we are not there yet for most other areas, especially within social impact. So I think we just need a collaborative effort to align our taxonomies, align our metrics and the standards and frameworks we are using. Thank you.
Thank you. Gabby, in terms of measurement, are there any promising models or best practices you would like to share?
Yeah, I would say the first one is that the conversation around impact measurement in Canada has been driven by, I think, the wrong entities because and I've been part of the community investment space, the corporate investment space for almost 20 years. And it's the same people from the same organization sitting together talking about impact measurement. And there's no representation from social innovation organizations or charities, which to me is baffling. And that conversation needs to be driven again from a collaboration perspective with representation from a whole slew of different organizations. And so one of the things that we've done recently is we launched a pilot where for our biggest charitable partners, we've topped up the funding that we've given them specifically for impact measurement. And so they've gone out now, we didn't tell them how to use it, but we said, use this in the best way that will be efficient for you to actually identify the tools, technology, resources, education that you need to properly measure the impact that you know you're having from the programs that you're doing. And so we're hoping to wrap that up in the next couple of months and then actually do a white paper on it because they're really the ones that are doing the work on the ground, understand the issues and the impact. And so that for us is going to be hopefully something that again will trigger a conversation because I think going back to Ebenezer's point, when a corporate is asked to disclose the impact that they're having through their programming, I mean, the corporate passes that on to the charities and it's a big burden for them. They often don't have the funding or resources to do that. So we're like, that is one, unfair. Two, if we really feel like that's something we need, we should be paying for that and giving them the resources to do it. And so I'm hoping that it'll attract some attention in terms of what that pilot results are and that other grant makers think of it in the same manner. But I think the other piece that we need to start thinking about is the timeframes we're using around the definition of impact. Because I've seen in many circumstances, corporates cancel programs when they haven't seen the right level of impact within a year or two, knowing that the organization's mandate is a systems change. It's going to take 5 to 10 years to actually understand the impact. And so if we're not understanding that, then programs that actually do have a lot of impact in the longer term are being cut off very shortly because the quantifiable metrics aren't there to justify what they would consider the investment. And so those are two things that I think we're still trying to grapple with. But again, there's a lot of resources out there. It's just really trying to map out what makes the most sense, I think, specifically for the organizations that we're working with to really try to understand the impact that we're having.
Okay, thank you. Adam, are there any promising models or practices you would like to share?
Yeah, I think there's loads of different promising practices. I popped a few of them in the chat, like the impact management project, again, common approach to impact measurement, impact frontiers, and so you can take a look and learn about those. I'm not an expert, but certainly happy to share those resources. I think when we imagine impact, we try to look at it in a few different ways. So one is there's kind of principle-based approaches. So do you have the right kind of theory of change? Are you kind of following and abiding by things like within the common approach, they have the common foundations, which includes things like disclosure, collection of information, the use of information to improve practice. And so kind of principle-based approaches or things like the 50-30 challenge, which again is related to gender and racial equity. Then I think do you abide by or apply certain standards? And so there's things like the B impact assessment in small and large companies. That's a useful kind of method to be able to collect and assess impact. And then, do you produce metrics on an ongoing basis? And so are you collecting information related to your, again, carbon intensity of practice, related to your benefits, et cetera, for employees, policies, et cetera. And so that collection and then obviously public reporting of that information is also pretty critical. And then you can align that to the Sustainable Development Goals. I think that's also an increasingly a common practice. And then on process, which is just as important to all of these things, when we think about impact not as a point in time activity that either I do it or I don't, but it's a commitment to be able to improve and measure impact over time. And so that it's not just a tick box exercise, but one that my father was in the steel business for a long time. He was in quality assurance. And he always used to say, it's not me going in and auditing the company and the report, but it's the time I spend with them to be able to improve their practices and operations, which actually gets us to a point of improvement. And I think the same principle applies to impact. By asking questions, by engaging in the practice of measuring and doing is going to get us in a small way on a business or investment basis, but also just ask us questions kind of culturally and societally about what's the world you're trying to build. What are you doing to improve the climate? Underpins a lot of this, or what are you doing in order to advance equity? If I constantly ask that question and I'm asked that question, hopefully you get to a better place.
Thank you. Thank you. Ebenezer, do you have any closing thoughts or calls to action that you would like to share?
Yes, I would like to have a call to action. And it's quite important to me, so I've actually written it. So let me read it out. I say we at BKR are always at the lookout for like-minded partners and to collaborate with us in ecosystem building initiatives. We truly believe that venture capital is a key to unlocking the creation of more innovative products and services that will serve all Canadians, while also providing this unique opportunity for sustainable economic empowerment for various communities, including the Black community. If you believe in our mission and if you'd like to contribute in any way, shape, or form, please don't hesitate to contact us, and we would love to see how we could collaborate to either supporting the next wave of fund managers or supporting the next wave of talented entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds. Thank you. I'll post it.
Yes, post it, and thank you guys for putting all the links. Thank Adam for putting those links for the measurements and the research. Gabby, any closing remarks or calls to action?
Yeah, I would say twofold. I think one is for those within the corporate sector or on the granting side, spend as much time thinking about how you make decisions versus what you're granting to. Because I think oftentimes the biggest impact will actually be removing the barriers to getting funding to the right organizations. And historically, how we've done it in the past is just not going to work. And social innovation is different than just donations. And how we approach it is different. And so I think one is that piece. And then the second one is as you said it initially, we can't do this alone, and look for partnerships. If you're genuine about what that partnership is actually going to look like, look for collaboration and approach this space from with a learning mindset, because we definitely don't have the answers, and what we've done in the past hasn't obviously worked. And so we need to think differently about how we want to approach this space in the future.
Thank you. I'm telling you, collaboration, that's the only way. You guys are doing such remarkable work, but it's like it feels like you guys are covering so much, but then it's like there's still so much more that needs to be done. And it's like, wow. So like, Adam, do you have any closing remarks or any calls to action?
I mean, I think everyone said it really well. So I'll just reemphasize, though, again, the call for collaboration, finding opportunities at small and large scale to be able to work together to advance social, economic, environmental justice when we can. Again, doing it alone, you'll go fast. Doing it together, you go far and can achieve and advance significant change. I think maybe one thing that I would also maybe ask for a call to action, and that is, this is going to be very specific, but also maybe broad as well. And that is, when you go into your bank or financial institution, ask them about the impact of your portfolio. What are they doing with your capital? So don't be afraid to be able to advance institutional change by asking very simple questions like that. I think second is, let's not forget the valuable role that policy and legislative change has in advancing the aims that we want to seek. As much as social innovation incredibly important, it should not and does not rely exclusively on community action or private and community sector action. That government is a fundamental partner, and we need to be able to continue to work with and alongside government to achieve our aims. And so let's make sure we continue to call, email our MPs, our councillors, our MPPs, our members of the legislative assembly, all of that, because they're fundamentally a part of what we do. So that'd be my other call to action.
Informative. I'm sure the attendees have gained a lot of knowledge. And again, guys, make sure that you click on those links if you have any questions, if anything you want to be part of, making a change. So again, we appreciate your time and your remarkable leadership. We thank all the attendees today. And as we will close the way we began this interview by acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we are on. We also acknowledge our ancestors. We acknowledge all those who have toiled without compensation or compassion. We acknowledge all the elders and the community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, we share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. We thank you, Setsi. Thanks you. There is going to be another session at 12 p.m. And yes, enjoy. Everybody stay warm. Thank you.
Thank you.